Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Kurt Watinsky, and this is one of a series of interviews I've been conducting as part of the More Housing Wisconsin project, which is co-sponsored by the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, the Wisconsin Realtors Association, and the Wisconsin Builders Association. The focus of this series of interviews is on housing, but more particularly, what can local governments, mainly cities and villages, do to generate more housing in their communities? We have been talking with and learning from local leaders, both in the public sector and private sector, who have had some experience and some success in implementing zoning reform and other strategies designed to create more housing in their communities. Joining me today, I'm excited to say, is Ahmad Rivera Wagner, who is Chief of Staff for Green Bay Mayor Eric Genrich. And among Ahmad's many duties as Chief of Staff is overseeing the kind of housing issues in the city, including serving as project director for a large housing development project that the city initiated on vacant land that they received as a donation from a local employer. So we're really excited to hear about that project and another one. But before we get into that detail, first, let me just welcome you. Thank you, Ahmad, for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Hey,
And
and thank you for having me.
yes, thank you. And so I thought we could just start with maybe you kind of laying the I don't know, the stage for what the situation is in your city, in Green Bay, as far as housing goes. And I know the city conducted a housing needs assessment, at least within the last couple of years. And maybe you can share with us some of the, I don't know, statistics that came out of that analysis.
Yeah, so first and foremost, thank you so much for having me. As one housing nerd to another, I'm excited to be talking about this
Great.
issue. And I want to just preface it why housing is both important to me personally and what it means to our communities. I was raised by a teenage mom who experienced homelessness for the first 10 years of her and my life together. And then the reason we were able to become homeowners is a public-private partnership called Habitat for Humanity, where a local municipality donated land to a nonprofit that worked with different people across all kinds of backgrounds. We actually built the house that my mom lives in to this day. And we saw the difference it made to create that level of stability that allowed me to become one of the first people in my families to go to college, go on to be able to be a chief of staff for the mayor of Green Bay. And so we know how important housing is to individual families, but you also know that from a statistical standpoint, higher homeownership rates or higher stability rates for housing decreases crime, increases positive health outcomes. Often longitudinal progress from graduating high school to graduating 4-year and 2-year institutions go up when the home ownership rate rises, as well as the stability of housing rises. So we know that housing is the centerpiece or the cornerstone of a community that's connected to so many positive outcomes. And so that is why this mayor and I am incredibly passionate about making sure we do that. In Green Bay, we're in an interesting place. We just recently were ranked the #1 place to live in the country. We have an unemployment rate around 1%.
Yeah.
So which is absolutely wild, right? And which means that we have an housing crisis. It means that despite as wonderful as this community is, whether you are a C-suite executive or a frontline worker at a meatpacking plant, people are competing for housing in the market from rent to home ownership. There are housing units that are going in less than 24 hours, up to 72 hours, going over 30 to 40,000 of asking price. We are just at a standstill because we cannot produce more housing given all these other elements, which I know you and I will get into. And a study that was recently conducted for us said that we had to be producing approximately 400 different types of units in the city of Green Bay to meet demand. And we had to do that for 10 straight years.
Wow.
That is a lot to ask of any municipality, but one of the things that we do here in Green Bay is we dream big. And not only do we dream big, we push really hard to ensure that we meet those goals, right? You know, we're Titletown. So we do the impossible stuff all the time. And so one of the many projects that I've gotten to work on is this JBS project, which is a public-private partnership that gifted us 26 acres of land and $500,000 and basically said, figure it out. And so we're really, really excited about that. But we're a city in crisis in the most positive way possible, which is that we need more housing for every income level. And we know that by building more, we're going to help folks across the income spectrum.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that JBS project that I saw that you just started work on putting in the infrastructure to make this possible. So this is, correct me and fill me in on the details, but so this is a municipal initiated project.
Mhm.
It's going to cost maybe, I don't know if I read correctly, 14 million to put in the assets and the infrastructure to lay the groundwork to make it possible for the apartments and single family homes to follow. Tell us a little bit. So how did this come to be? And you said a little bit that JBS started, which is great. But where are you coming up with? Where's the city coming up with the rest of the money? And how did you get a vision for what this development might look like? Where did that come from?
So, fantastic questions, and I'm overly excited to tell you about them. This came out of the COVID, right? So
Yes.
we saw that there was a major housing crisis even during that time. And in the wake of that, JBS worked with the city on wanting to address this general challenge that they wanted to be both more community minded and that their workers were struggling to find housing in this community. So the mayor worked with JBS to say what we probably could do is this vacant parcel of land that was designated as farmland but had been in private hands for the better part of 50 to 100 years that was just going unutilized, right? Whether as farmland or anything else. And that happens a lot in Wisconsin. People hold on to property. So there's nothing strange about that. But the mayor was convinced that there is a place and possibility for calling it a housing laboratory. How can we do placemaking and address our crisis while dealing with this neighborhood? So the neighborhood adjacent to JBS, which we call Imperial Pride, probably was poorly planned from the onset. It's a neighborhood that is mostly transient. Often a lot of new arrivals come to this community of all different backgrounds, of all different languages. It has a huge concentration of income restricted housing, and it was not built like any other part of the city. Green Bay is known for its parks, its walkability, its bikeability, and this neighborhood is somewhat enclosed by itself. And you can see the outcomes that we're having in this neighborhood were more negative than any of its other adjacent neighborhoods. So higher incidence of crime. There was no neighborhood association. There were other types of health indicators, and that's despite these folks doing work, being good folks. This neighborhood kind of created the conditions that often were negative that do
Mhm.
not match up with the city. So we said, what could we do to create something dynamic that would connect this community that's physically disconnected from the rest of Green Bay and do a housing laboratory? The answer was a missing middle neighborhood development that had all kinds of options for families and was reflective of the broad swath of incomes that were in the neighborhood. So despite being an income restricted neighborhood, the actual incomes were actually much more diverse than people thought. And so there was a lot of assumptions that were made there. So we actually reached out to Harvard Bloomberg and applied for a grant.
Mhm.
We worked with the smartest thinkers in the country and across the world about how could we create a process that brings people in, helps them design and be a part of the solution across various different backgrounds. We have never done anything like this. And so the mayor then essentially said, Ahmad, figure it out. So with the help of Harvard Bloomberg and a lot of the skills and talents and trainings that they had, we brought people together, which we lovingly called the G40, which are 40 different stakeholders of all different backgrounds who had some kind of stakeholding interest in this neighborhood. And so we've met for 2.5 years from implementation to the idea iteration. These 40 folks and community members were part of the design process. So as you said, one of the things that we learned is that one of the reasons why housing is so expensive, and we wanted to hear from the developer side, was that often infrastructure is a barrier to entry for the building of numerous housing units. So one of the things that we figured out with the help of the Governor Evers team is that we applied for a grant so that we could help build the park, the boulevard, the urban farm. But the actual infrastructure, streets, roads, water, sewer, we actually reduced the cost per lot between $30,000 and $60,000. And when we put the RFP out naming that, we had the most home builder responses that we've ever had for RFP.
Mm.
And we were able to defray the cost for them. But that also meant that we had a big role in what kind of housing we wanted to see in this neighborhood. On top of that, we were able to have folks feel like this neighborhood was reflective of them. One of the misnomers from all different backgrounds was that everyone wanted what people call affordable housing.
Yeah.
But what we were seeing in these neighborhoods was that their very extended families often had multiple income earners. So if someone was there, like in the Latino families that had an abuela with them, or a recent immigrant family had multi-generationals with them, they actually had multiple income earners. They actually didn't qualify
Wow.
for income restricted housing. And they were looking for 3 and 4 bedroom housing units, whether that's homes or apartments. So we had to think more thoughtfully to make sure that the people in this neighborhood and people who might come into this neighborhood could actually live here. And that what we were seeing is that they were being pushed out by the income restrictions. And so we found a way to bring this, what I like to call the magic in the mixture, that we could bring all kinds of affordability across the income spectrum together, and they could live in this neighborhood. And our best neighborhoods have that mixture of housing stock and incomes. And that often results in the best life outcomes, both for the community and the people in them. And so it really was incredible to bring the business community and developers in alignment with community activists and residents who all wanted to see themselves in this project. And we were able to do that. And then we're trying to replicate this kind of engagement in other projects. And so there's all different aspects that I can dive into, but the truth is, what we really truly found with the help of Harvard Bloomberg and the financial supports of the governor's administration and our common council was that by bringing this $15 million together and all of these people together, we are leveraging that investment to have a neighborhood upwards of value at $30 million. And so that is the kind of incredible thoughtfulness that comes with really smart approaches that doesn't really leave anyone behind, but has a very clear focus about building more and many.
Amazing, exciting. I'm excited just to hear about it, to watch it, and just so our viewers and listeners understand. So the all the lead up to this took a couple years, but you've actually broke ground, and I assume work will be commencing on the infrastructure part this fall. Is that kind of the
Right.
plan?
And so, yes, it did take a couple years, but this the construction has already begun.
Okay.
So, as in August of this year, we've actually started construction of the infrastructure. While it took us about 2 years, as you know, in housing, that is honestly light years.
Right.
We often
Yep.
tell people that we're building about 200 units. We might even be able to get more than 200 units into this neighborhood in 26 acres, given that not all of it is developable, uh, faster than any other single project we've ever done. And the irony was that we actually did more engagement, but just more purposeful than we've ever done. But we also expedited the timeline because of grants and other tools. So what's so interesting about this project is that we sped up the actual timeline for construction and development while simultaneously increasing the amount of engagement. And so what I like to tell people is we prove something very clear to folks, that we don't have to slow down projects and make them take 10 years, that there's a way and to make projects speed up if the engagement is more purposeful and specific, and that engagement doesn't have to hold a project back. But you have to be more clear-eyed about what is possible in those
Hmm.
spaces.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I think that's really, really important. It takes too long for us to build missing middle housing in neighborhoods. And that's across the state, that's
Yeah.
rural or urban. This is a statewide problem that we have to find a way to expedite housing. And we can't use engagement as an excuse to slow it down. Because one of the things that we learned and why people were so excited is they saw themselves in the project having real tangible benefits. When people told us they wanted a bikeable neighborhood, when we had our groundbreaking, they could see the bike trails. When people talked about they wanted to be able to have family events with barbecues and fires, they saw the fire pits that we had developed. When folks said that they wanted, regardless of age, to be able to hang out in the space, they saw climbing things for young people. They saw large swing sets for folks with different abilities. They saw places to play chess and bags and places to do these elements.
Hmm.
Every single thing that we put into this design was reflective of community and stakeholder input. And that really allowed for the speed to move incredibly fast because there wasn't an assumption that we didn't get it right. It was, in fact, every time we had a meeting and we showed people how we've incorporated their feedback, people kept saying to us, which was like magic words to me, we see ourselves in this neighborhood and we see ourselves in this design. But that gave us the permission structure to expedite this process. And so
Sure.
we're really proud that we did both of those things.
Yeah, that's remarkable. So just the 14 million basically is funded through ARPA grants, right? American Rescue Plan in the wake of COVID to try and stimulate the economy again. Federal government gave the states a lot of money, and now the state is passing on some of those monies, and you're using those part of those grants to do this.
Yeah, and there's three funding sources. So there was
Yeah.
obviously private dollars from the corporate partners in our communities. So that was about
Yes.
500,000. There was about $5.5 million given to us through the governor, through ARPA funds called a neighborhood investment grant. And then we created a TID district
Oh, yes.
that had to be approved by Common Council to bring together the approximate $14 million. So it was, and I know it sounds so cheesy, but it was federal, state, and local dollars with private investment combined with the expedited process while also bringing people together that actually brought all of the funding together to make it possible. And then it ended up being a market solution that all those investments are actually doubling during our model. It might be more, obviously in the future, five to
Sure.
seven years in the future, 20 years in the future. But even the estimates now means that the value that we put in are going to double by the time the project is developed. And so I think that says a lot that you can use and leverage government and private dollars and donations to really come up with innovative housing solutions.
Yeah, it's a great example of public-private partnership for housing. So this that's very exciting to hear, and I'm eager to learn as the years go by how this all pans out in the end, which I think it will, and it'll be I think it'll serve as a great model for other communities. Let's just shift a little bit, and I want to talk about another project that the city was involved in because I think this project is called City East Center, and it was developed on vacant land that the city had owned. It's mainly focused now more on kind of traditional affordable housing that are eligible for federal low-income
That's
housing
correct.
credits and stuff like that. Can you tell us a little bit about the City East Center and what that might mean for the city?
So in many ways, inspired by the JPS project, we had folks reaching out to us, a nonprofit community group called the Brown County Free United Way,
Sure.
and they were looking for a permanent home to build a potential community center. We had this vacant parcel of land that has been there for, I want to say at least a decade, it might be even longer. And we couldn't get a developer who wanted to get not only develop that land, but could get the application enough for the tax credits.
Okay.
And so City played matchmaker with these two entities and said, could we figure out a way to bring in the nonprofit community, the city land, and private developers and put together a proposal? And it's not just income restricted housing. It's actually what we call affordability. So it's actually it's for everybody, but there
Sure.
are some income restricted units, but it's actually a mixed income development in a desperately needed neighborhood where this was just an empty parcel of land,
Yeah.
where we mowed it when the grass got too long. And so they, again, which was incredible, we brought them together and instantly that kind of application sailed through the funding mechanisms. And within a year, we're in construction and completed. And now people are already living in them. And what's really cool about that is one of the anchor institutions is built into the apartment complex. So Brown County United Way is doing things from tax preparedness to helping folks get the resources they need, fighting hunger, funding other nonprofits. Their new home base is actually on one of part of the bottom floor to actually help improve a neighborhood that's been struggling with vulnerabilities. And so we just had this ribbon cutting that had over 100 people attending from all different walks of life, including the corporate community, the advocate community, local and state government, and even the White House came down to visit to see this as an example of figuring out how to build a lot of units incredibly fast by bringing different partners together who had a shared interest, and the funding was able to kick in immediately. And so what we're seeing here in Green Bay, the alchemy is that there are people bridging divides that maybe never really existed, that there is a role to play for advocates and developers, the government to come together in these really smart ways to kind of build 45 new units in a single year where people are already living there because we were people who are ready to do the work were facilitated to come together by the city of Green Bay. And so there really is something magical happening here in Green Bay. We are a team-oriented place. We're the place where the community owns the Packers, we're shareholders. There is like a team-oriented approach. And what this mayor has been able to do that's really brilliant is using that approach, we are able to expedite both funding and process to really start meeting the needs of the housing crisis. And we're just seeing what's crazy is the units are almost all full. It just opened, right? And so like that's what we already have a waiting list for the JBS units, and only 65 are going to be built in the next year or so. There's already a waiting list.
Yeah.
It is wild that like we not only we're not keeping up with demand, people are ecstatic to be living in these kind of new partnership-based products, and they're
Yeah.
gorgeous to look at. They look like the diversity of this neighborhood. The units look like they fit into our neighborhoods, so we're able to kind of match style and purpose, and I think that's really important.
Well, what these two projects show me is it's a great example of a city facilitating what other people thought maybe couldn't work or wasn't working. The private sector wasn't able to maybe bring it together, or nonprofit organizations on their own. But the city stepped in and facilitated both these examples, bringing parties together for funding and also engagement with the public. So um, my hat's off to you and the mayor and the city for these projects. And I just wanted maybe we could kind of conclude our discussion here with maybe are there any lessons learned or advice you might pass along to cities, all across Wisconsin of various sizes? Cities are struggling with the same housing crisis, housing shortage. Any lessons that you might think of or best practices that you've learned that you might want to suggest or pass on to folks who are watching and trying to think of strategies they could employ in their city?
First and foremost, we have to just acknowledge that what we're doing now is insufficient, right? I think there was a shared understanding that we just couldn't do more of the way that we were approaching it. That there's lots of options in there's lots of arrows in our quiver, but that we had to change the model, right? And that the model included that the private market itself was insufficient and the nonprofit market in itself was insufficient, and that there was a role to play for governments at every level. And I think that's a really important shift, right? I think that is different than where most people are at. And we're seeing it's not just our community thinking thoughtfully about this. For example, Howard Schwamico just recently developed their own neighborhoods
Yes.
and became the developer themselves. So people are reimagining what's possible. So I think that is the first and foremost is that government has a really smart role to play. There's a way to bring in advocates and industry experts and the marketplace and bring those people together to talk about shared process. That's like number one. I think two is that everyone is interested in speed. I think there is an assumption that government wants to slow things down. I think we have to get past those kind of preconceived notions. Everyone is interested in expediting the process, and you need to make sure municipalities are thinking about that when we can prove to people that development can happen in a year or 2 years, we send indicators to the marketplace that we're interested in playing ball, but we also showcase to our residents that we want to make a dent in the problem that they're seeing. And there really is a deep shared interest here. And then lastly, I think there is a review your process, right? One of the things that helped us with Harvard Bloomberg is that we really did look through what was happening. And one of the things that we did that we're really proud of that we probably will emulate or re-emulate is that I was the project manager for this JBS project. There was one person whose job it is to carry this process all the way through from start to finish. We saw that that model made a huge difference in expediting processes, even both externally and internally. And so this idea that we carry the project from birth to completion with one person being able to know all the different aspects, even if they're not an expert in every single aspect, really made a powerful difference because there was always someone that can also be held accountable. But when there were questions or concerns from different parties and stakeholders, those could be answered. And we saw this portfolio management where we weren't just handing things off and saying, I did my part off my to-do list. Every single day, as part of many of my duties, I woke up saying, where is the JBS project? What's going to happen next? What is that going to look like? Same thing with City East. Did everyone meet? Did it go together? Does it have to go before council? What permits do people need? These types of portfolio-based management where one person is responsible really made a big difference. And then I will end with, lastly, bringing in experts. I do have a deep expertise in housing. There's many things I know, but we brought in different people who might give us feedback, from folks who talked about stormwater design, from folks that talked about housing type. We brought the industry experts and advocates saying, what do you want to see in your neighborhood? And not just what you want to see. We didn't ask them to design it. We said, what are the things that you see in a neighborhood that you want to make sure your neighborhood has? And so we took walkability and showed it what it could look like. And that made it easier. We talked to Marketplace and said, what would make it easier for you to build more units? Taking up and doing infrastructure or helping us with infrastructure. So we then put that in the model. And so taking these expertise, asking what they want to see or what their challenges were, and interpreting that into a design and an improvement in process made all the difference. So I think those are the kind of things I would encourage other municipalities to try to tackle, because I think there is, as I like to say, magic in the mixture. Bringing all these different things together really does open up possibility.
Ahmad, thank you very much for that succinct list of lessons learned and for your passion and for the good work that the city of Green Bay is doing on housing issues. If people watching this video are interested in hearing more examples of public-private partnerships for housing, our informational briefing paper that'll be published in October, Workforce, is on ways that communities can work with the private sector to bring about more workforce housing. And I encourage you to take a look at it. And stay tuned for our next month's topic will be on how do you use TIF districts and the extension, the affordable housing extension for affordable housing creation in your community. Thanks again, Ahmad, and look forward to seeing how these two projects pan out in the future.